My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm 64 years old, and I built everything I have from a two-bay auto shop on the south side of Atlanta. 6 months ago, I thought the worst thing life could ever hand me was watching my wife of 40 years take her last breath in a hospital bed. I was wrong. I walked out to my garage on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, same as I do every single day, just to be near the one thing my wife loved more than anything on this earth besides me and our son, a 1965 Chevrolet Impala SS. She spent 26 years bringing back from a rusted-out shell to a candy apple red miracle. Instead of that car, I found an empty concrete slab and a dark stain of fresh transmission fluid where she used to sit. I called my son, Terrell. Over the sound of a boarding announcement, he told me casual as ordering lunch that he'd sold her. "Ma's gone, Pop," he said. "Why you still babying a piece of old metal? Kendra's been going through it since the funeral. She needed a trip to get her head right." "Get over it, man." I stood there gutted until my phone rang 40 minutes later. It was Otis Redmond, a man who's run the finest classic car lot on this side of the state for 30 years. "Marcus," he said, his voice tight in a way I'd never heard from him. "Your boy just dropped your wife's car here for a fast cash wire. You need to get down here now. She left something for you, hidden in that car. You need to see this with your own eyes. Family, if you've ever had your own blood look you dead in the eye and betray you, hit that like button for me. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one of my stories. And tell me down in the comments, where are you at right now? And what's the clock say on your wall? It does something for me, knowing who's out there listening to an old man talk. It was a Sunday morning, 6 months to the day since I buried my wife, Odessa. 38 years of marriage, gone in one bad heartbeat in the produce aisle of a grocery store. The house had gone so quiet since she passed that some mornings I forgot how to move through my own rooms. She was the reason Whitfield Automotive went from one lift and a hand-me-down toolbox to 4 locations across metro Atlanta. But out in that garage, that car was hers and hers alone. A 1965 Impala SS, black cherry paint, white interior, a car she'd bought as a wrecked Hulk at an estate auction the same year we opened our second shop. For 26 years, she rebuilt that car with her own 2 hands between running our books, raising our son, and burying 2 of her own sisters. That car wasn't just sheet metal to her. It was proof she could take something broken and make it whole again, same as she did for me, back when I was a 19-year-old kid with more pride than sense. Every morning since the funeral, I'd go stand next to that car, just to smell the old vinyl, and remember, her hands were the last hands that touched it. That Sunday, I opened the garage door, coffee steaming in my hand, and I stopped like I'd walked into a wall. The mug slipped right out of my fingers and shattered on the floor, coffee scalding across my boots, and I didn't even flinch. The bay was empty. Nothing there but a fresh, dark drip where the transmission had leaked, same spot it always leaked. I checked the side door, locked tight. I checked the main door mechanism. Nothing forced, nothing broken, no alarm tripped. Somebody who knew the code did this. Somebody who knew exactly how that system worked. And there's only 2 people on God's earth who had that code besides me, my shop foreman, currently down in Panama City with his grandkids, and my son, Terrell. Terrell is 36 years old. He lives in a house 3 streets over that I put the down payment on myself, because that's what a father does. He's always had a taste for nice things, a taste that got a whole lot more expensive after he married Kendra 4 years back. Kendra never met a designer bag she didn't feel she was owed. My hands were shaking when I pulled out my phone and called my son. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Pop, what's going on?" Too casual. And underneath his voice, I could hear it, the airport chimes, the crowd noise, a gate agent calling a flight. He was at Hartsfield. "Terrell," I said, and my voice was tighter than I wanted it to be. "Where are you? And where is your mother's car?" There was a pause. Not a guilty pause, an annoyed one, like I was bothering him over nothing. "I'm at the airport, Pop," he sighed. "Kendra and I are heading out to Turks and Caicos for a couple weeks." "I don't care where you're headed," I snapped, the shock finally cracking into anger. "I asked you where the Impala is." "Look, Pop, I didn't want to make this a whole thing," he said, that tone in his voice he always gets when he thinks he's smarter than everybody in the room. I sold it. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. I had to grab the workbench to keep my legs under me. You did what? I sold it, he said again, louder, talking over another boarding call. Ma's been gone 6 months, Pop. Why are you still keeping that thing like some kind of shrine? It just sits there collecting dust and making you sadder every time you look at it. That car, I said, my voice shaking, was your mother's whole heart. It wasn't yours to sell. You stole from me, Terrell. Stole? He actually laughed. Pop, don't be dramatic. I'm your only child. That car was going to be mine one day anyway. I just moved the timeline up a little. And I needed the cash. Cash for what? I demanded. Kendra's been struggling bad since the funeral, he said. Like that explained everything. I almost laughed right back at him. Kendra hadn't shed one real tear at Odessa's funeral. She'd spent the whole repast complaining the catering was cold. She needed to get away, clear her mind. Somewhere nice. First class, oceanfront, the whole thing. I did it for my wife, Pop. You always did whatever it took for Ma. I'm just doing the same for mine. Get over it. It's just a car. Get over it. Like I hadn't heard my own son use those exact words about the woman who raised him. He had broken into my home, robbed his own mother's legacy, and now he was lecturing me on being a good husband. They're calling our group, he said. We'll be off the grid for a while. We'll talk when we're back. Relax, Pop. Go fishing or something. The line went dead. I stood in that empty garage a long time, the silence just ringing in my ears. He actually believed I'd roll over. He thought because I was 64 and grieving, I'd forgotten how to fight. But underneath the shock, something colder started rising up in me. The same cold, clear thinking that took Whitfield Automotive from a 2-bay garage to 4 shops and a fleet contract with half the delivery companies in the state. I walked back inside and sat down at my desk, and I started doing what I've always done best, running the numbers. A first-class trip to Turks and Caicos, even doing it up right, might run you $25,000, $30,000. But I knew exactly what that Impala was worth. Odessa and I had it appraised for insurance not 2 years back. A numbers matching 65 SS in that condition fully documented that car was worth no less than $380,000, maybe more to the right collector. So where was the other $350,000? Terrell was arrogant. He was spoiled, but he wasn't fool enough to give up a car worth that much for 1/10 of its value just to buy plane tickets. He was hiding something. That vacation was a smokescreen, dressed up to make me furious about his entitlement, instead of curious about what he was really doing with that money. My gut told me there was something a whole lot bigger sitting underneath this. I reached for the phone to call my lawyer, Denise Calloway, to freeze his access to everything and start the paperwork on cutting him out of my will for good. My finger was hovering right over her name when my phone buzzed an incoming call. Otis Redmond. Otis ran the best classic car showroom in the whole Atlanta metro. He'd known Odessa going on 20 years, the two of them trading parts, arguing over paint codes, talking shop for hours. Otis didn't suffer fools, but he respected my wife more than anybody left in that business. I picked up right away. Marcus, he said, his voice low and wound tight. I'm sorry to call you this early, but we've got ourselves a situation. I know, I said flatly. My son stole the Impala. I'm guessing he brought it to you. He did, ourself, said, grim. Rolled it onto my lot about 2 hours ago, demanding a fast cash wire, sweating like he had somewhere to be. Said you two were downsizing the estate? Did you send the money? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. I started the wire to get him off my lot, Otis said, but I put a 24-hour internal hold on it. I knew good and well Odessa would never let that boy sell her car to fund some vacation. I felt real gratitude for that man in that moment. Thank you, Otis. I'll have my lawyer file a dispute today. Marcus, hold on, Otis said, and his voice dropped lower. That's not even why I'm calling. Forget the wire for a second. What is it? When he dropped the car, my guys did the standard intake, Otis said. Your wife was meticulous, Marcus, but I noticed the driver's side door panel sat just a hair off, barely a 1/16 of an inch. I frowned. Odessa never left a panel misaligned in her life. I popped it off to reseat the clips, Otis continued, and his voice went heavy. Marcus, Your son didn't just dump a car on my lot. Your wife left something hidden in that door. It's addressed to you. You need to get down here right now, Marcus. You need to see this yourself. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. Terrell's voice was still ringing in my ears. Get over it, like I'd raised a stranger and not a son. He thought he was dealing with a broken old man who'd cry over a car and forget about it in a week. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I didn't build 4 auto shops from one bay by turning the other cheek. When I was 26 years old and a bigger shop across town tried to run me out of business by undercutting every price I set, I didn't fold. I outworked them until they were the ones who closed. I stood up, straightened my back, and I went and did what I do best. I got in my truck and drove to Otis's lot. And the whole 30-minute drive, my mind was working through decades at a time. I thought about my son, a man so comfortable on the money I gave him that he mistook my love for stupidity. And then I thought about Odessa. My wife wasn't just a woman who liked fixing up old cars in her spare time. She ran the books for Whitfield Automotive for 31 years. Every account, every ledger, every dollar. She had a mind sharper than any accountant I ever hired after her, and an instinct for a lie that bordered on supernatural. If a woman with that mind took the time to hide something deep inside, the one possession she loved most in this world, it wasn't a keepsake. It was a weapon. I pulled up to Otis's lot, gates already open, and found him standing next to the Impala under those bright shop lights, that black cherry paint just swallowing up all the light in the room. He didn't shake my hand. His face was grim, all business. He just nodded toward the passenger side of the car. The door panel had already been pulled and laid gentle across a workbench. The inside of the door-exposed window regulator, sound dampening, the whole skeleton of it. And right there, tucked behind a layer of that foam padding, was a rectangular space where something had been glued in place. Otis reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy-duty waterproof pouch and handed it to me. Inside, I could see a small black flash drive and a folded piece of stationery, Odessa's own paper, the kind she always kept in her desk drawer. My hands, which had stayed steady through union negotiations and bank meetings that would have buckled most men, started trembling. I sliced open the pouch and unfolded that letter, and I recognized her handwriting the second I saw it. The date at the top of that page stopped my breath cold. It was dated 11 days before the heart attack that took her from me. She wrote this letter 11 days before she died. Marcus, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and it means our son took the bait. A cold feeling spread through my whole body. I forced myself to keep reading. You always wanted to believe Terrell's arrogance was just a phase, that Kendra's greed was just youth she'd grow out of. But I spent my whole professional life tracking money, and our son is the biggest liability this family has ever produced. I left a pre-signed blank title hidden in the bottom of that glove box. I knew the second I was gone, Terrell would come looking for fast cash to feed Kendra's appetite. I wanted to test him. I wanted to see if he would honor what I built or sell me out for quick money. If this letter is in your hands, you already have your answer. I stopped reading a second, chest heaving. My wife had built a loyalty test from beyond the grave, and the boy we raised had failed it in the ugliest way a son could fail. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't mourned. He saw his mother's death as a payday. The letter didn't stop there. But this isn't just about a stolen car, Marcus. Terrell isn't just a spoiled child, throwing a fit. He's funding a betrayal that's going to destroy everything we built together. That drive holds everything I've been quietly investigating these past 5 months. I didn't want to bring it to you until I had proof, but my heart's been giving me trouble, and I'm afraid I'm running out of time. Plug it into a secure machine. Look at the banking records. Don't let your love for that boy blind you to the math. Burn the rot out of our family, Marcus. Do what has to be done. I folded the letter back along its creases and slid it into my jacket, then took the flash drive in my palm. It felt heavier than lead. Odessa had spent her last months on this earth hunting down a threat I never even saw. I looked at Otis. He didn't ask a single question. He just watched my face, waiting. Otis, I said, my voice unnaturally calm. I need to use your back office computer right now. Otis led me down a hallway to a small back office that smelled like motor oil and old coffee. He pulled a heavy laptop from a locked drawer and set it on the desk, and the screen lit up pale blue across the dim room. I sat down, plugged in the drive, and typed in the security code Odessa and I always used for anything serious. A single folder appeared on the desktop, labeled with our son's name. I opened it, and inside was a meticulously organized archive folders labeled with bank names, wire dates, corporate filings. My wife had spent 5 months building an airtight case. I opened the first folder, marked Travel. Terrell claimed he needed the money for Kendra's trip to Turks and Caicos. I found a booking confirmation for 2 first-class tickets and an oceanfront suite. For half a second, a wave of confusion hit me had he been telling the truth after all. Then I opened the next document. A cancellation notice, booked on a Sunday morning and refunded in full 48 hours later. The whole vacation was a ghost. A cheap decoy, designed to make me furious about wasted money on some frivolous trip, so I'd never look any deeper at what he was really doing with that cash. I opened the next file, the real travel manifest. Terrell and Kendra weren't headed to the Caribbean at all. They'd booked a private charter out of a small regional airfield outside the city. Their real destination was Panama City, Panama, not the beach town in Florida, the actual country. And Panama isn't exactly known for oceanfront healing retreats. It's one of the biggest offshore banking and shell company registries left in the world. A heavy realization settled in my gut. That missing $350,000 wasn't going toward hotel rooms. My son was moving cash offshore. I backed out of that folder and opened the next one, labeled Acquisitions. Hundreds of pages of scanned legal filings, offshore banking paperwork, and forwarded emails filled the screen. Odessa had tracked a whole chain of communication between Terrell and an offshore holding firm based in Panama City, a firm that specialized in anonymous corporate buyouts. Terrell was using them to build a completely untraceable shell company. I scrolled down looking for the target of the whole operation, and my heart stopped cold when I found it. The target was Redline Fleet Services. Redline was my single biggest rival in the Atlanta delivery contracting business. For nearly a decade, Whitfield Automotive and Redline had fought bitterly over every fleet maintenance contract in the metro area. We had the grocery chains locked down. They had the pharmacy distribution routes. And right then, we were in the middle of a massive bidding war for a regional contract that would set us up for the next 20 years. I kept reading, every piece of this thing snapping together with terrible clarity. Terrell wasn't just a greedy son looking for a quick payday. He was orchestrating a hostile offshore buyout of my biggest competitor. Redline was struggling, deep in debt, desperate for cash to stay afloat. And this offshore firm needed a serious, untraceable earnest money deposit to lock in the acquisition rights. I opened the final document, the escrow demand from the Panama firm. The required deposit was $380,000, the exact appraised value of Odessa's Impala. I sat back in that chair, the screen glowing in the dark, and the full scope of the betrayal settled over me like a weight. My son wasn't just stealing a car. He was plotting to steal my entire life's work. As my head of fleet operations, Terrell had access to every one of our pricing structures, every contract margin, every operational weakness we had. His plan was simple and sick. Use the stolen cash from his dead mother's car to secretly buy our struggling competitor. Then use his inside knowledge to systematically underbid every contract we had, bleeding Whitfield Automotive dry while he quietly reaped the profits offshore. He would bankrupt his own father and watch me lose everything I built, all while collecting untaxed money from a Caribbean-adjacent shell company. He stole his mother's legacy to finance the destruction of his father's business. I looked over at Otis, standing quiet in the doorway, arms crossed, watching my face. He didn't ask a single question. He just let me sit with it. The grief that had been sitting on my chest for 6 months started burning away, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. Terrell had looked me in the eye and told me to get over it. He'd used Kendra's supposed suffering as a weapon against my sympathy. He'd turned his mother's memory into a stepping stone for his own betrayal. I reached forward and ejected the drive, slipping it into my jacket pocket right beside Odessa's letter. My wife had spent her last months on this earth arming me for a war I didn't even know I was fighting. Terrell wanted a war. He was about to find out the man who built Whitfield Automotive from one bay did not show mercy to thieves. I thanked Otis and drove home in a blur, my mind working with a focus I hadn't felt since the day I opened my first shop. I locked myself in my home office, plugged the drive into my personal computer, isolated from anything else, and opened the folder labeled Internal Communications. Dozens of forwarded emails and server logs filled the screen. Odessa had mirrored a whole hidden network drive. I started reading the top thread, a tactical breakdown of our supply routes and vulnerable client contracts. The sender used a scrambled email account, but the phrasing, the specific language, it was too familiar. I scrolled down to where Odessa had attached an IP trace. She'd tracked the account back to a specific terminal inside my own headquarters. Terminal 6. My breath caught. That terminal belonged to Dwight. Dwight Halloway was my operations director. I hired him myself 8 years ago. Plucked him out of a failing shop because I saw a young, hungry version of myself in him. I mentored that man, paid him a top salary, trusted him with the keys to my company, and here he was, actively engineering the destruction of everything I built. As I read the emails between Dwight and the offshore firm, the real architecture of this whole scheme became clear. Terrell wasn't the mastermind. My son, for all his arrogance and his business degree, did not have the brains to orchestrate a shadow acquisition of a rival company. Terrell was a tool. He was the bloodline needed to access untraceable family money. Dwight fed him the plan. Terrell brought the cash. But the deeper I went, the darker it got. There was a third folder, separate from the corporate files, labeled with Kendra's name. My stomach turned to ice. Photos, hotel receipts, hundreds of captured text messages. Not corporate espionage. A 2-year-long affair. Photographs of Kendra and Dwight at a restaurant downtown, clearly taken by a private investigator Odessa must have hired. Hotel receipts under Dwight's name lining up perfectly with weekends. Terrell was out of town for business. I read the messages between my daughter-in-law and my own operations director, and my skin crawled. They weren't romantic. They were venomous. They mocked Terrell's gullibility, his desperate need to step out of my shadow, his blind trust in anyone who flattered him. Dwight had planted the whole red line buyout in Terrell's head. Kendra had spent months whispering in his ear that I'd never hand over the company, that he'd wait decades for what was rightfully his, until he was fully convinced that stealing from his own family was smart business. The final layer of it was worse. A locked spreadsheet Dwight shared only with Kendra, the post-acquisition financial model. Once the shell company bought Redline using Terrell's stolen money, Dwight planned to transfer every one of my premium contracts over to the new company, bankrupting me, while the resulting profits funneled into a private account neither Terrell nor I would ever touch. Dwight and Kendra were going to bleed my son dry, use his stolen money and his insider access, then disappear together with the money, leaving Terrell alone to face federal charges for fraud and grand theft. My son was a fool who stole his mother's legacy to fund a trip for a woman who despised him. But he was walking blind into a slaughterhouse, too blinded by his own ego and his wife's manipulation to see the blade at his own throat. I leaned back, rubbing my temples, the full weight of it settling in. A wife plotting against her husband, an executive plotting against his mentor, a son betraying his father. All of it circling $380,000. Odessa had watched the snakes circling our family and spent her last month storing up the venom so I could build the cure. I had every piece I needed, the banking routes, the forged documents, proof of the affair, and their exact coordinates for treason. They thought the vacation story had worked. While they quietly finalized their plan offshore, I closed every folder, pulled the drive, and held it in my hand. My anger had gone cold and solid, no longer a hot, chaotic thing. It was certainty. Dwight wanted to play the invisible corporate assassin. Kendra wanted to play the untouchable widow, running off with her lover. And Terrell thought he could buy his wife's love by selling out his own blood. I reached for my desk phone, ready to start the lockdown, when my cell phone buzzed. A text from Terrell. An image, followed by a short caption. I opened it. A selfie, taken inside a private jet cabin. Terrell holding a glass of champagne toward the camera. Kendra leaning into his shoulder in oversized sunglasses. Both of them glowing with the arrogance of people who thought they'd pulled off the heist of the century. The caption read, "Sorry about the car, Pop. We'll make it up to you when we're back from the islands. Love you." I read those words over and over. Sorry about the car. He'd reduced his mother's 26-year masterpiece to a minor inconvenience. Love you. The most offensive part of all, using the language of family to pacify a man he was actively plotting to destroy. I brought my thumb to the screen and started zooming in, studying that photo with the same care I'd give a contract worth millions. And then I saw it. In the upper corner of the frame, slightly blurred behind Kendra's hair, a flight attendant moved down the aisle in a uniform I recognized from a specific regional Panamanian charter service. I'd flown that same airline myself for a fleet parts convention 2 years back. Resting on her serving tray was a folded local newspaper, and even blurred, I could read the masthead, La Estrella de Panama. They weren't headed to the Caribbean. They'd sent me photographic proof of exactly where they really were. I set the phone down. The board was set. I knew where they were, what they were planning, and every name involved in this whole scheme. Most men in my shoes would have exploded, called the police, sent lawyers screaming to the airport. But I didn't build 4 shops by throwing tantrums. When you're about to take down an enemy who thinks he's smarter than you, the worst thing you can do is let him know you're holding a weapon. I needed them to land, walk into that Panama bank, and fully commit to the fraud before I flipped the whole table. I picked the phone back up and opened the keyboard. I didn't type a single word. I opened the emoji menu and sent one single thumbs up. Nothing else. Exactly what a tired, defeated old man would send. Exactly what Terrell wanted to see. I called my lawyer, Denise Calloway. Denise had been my counsel for 12 years, sharp as anybody in this city, and she never asked a question she didn't need answered. Denise, I need you to freeze every account tonight, I told her. Every trust, every card, every dime tied to Terrell or Kendra. She paused. That's a drastic move, Marcus. Cut off their financial oxygen, I said. Then I want his executive credentials at the company revoked. Strip his access to the servers. Cancel his cards. Lock him out of everything. He's not authorized to sign a single thing for Whitfield Automotive as of tonight. Denise went quiet a moment, then said, Understood. There's a third thing, I told her. Terrell stole his mother's car and tried to wire the money offshore to Panama. Denise exhaled sharp. Marcus, that's grand theft. I can have him met at the airport when he lands. No, I said. Don't call the police. File a fraud dispute with the bank instead. Let the federal wire fraud system do the heavy lifting. If we hit them with an international banking freeze instead of a local arrest, we turn a car theft into a federal case they can't buy their way out of. The following morning, I walked into my own office, looking like a broken man, shoulders slumped, and called Dwight in. He walked in wearing his sharp concern, telling me I should be home resting. I told him I was stepping back, that the grief had drained everything out of me, and that I was handing him full operational authority over the Redline acquisition accounts, the exact accounts he was secretly using to steal from me. I watched the greed flash behind his eyes before he buried it under fake gratitude. He signed every document I put in front of him, tying his name to every fraudulent transaction he was about to commit. Entirely unaware Denise had already flagged those accounts with federal banking authorities. 2 days later, my phone rang at 9 in the morning. Terrell, panicked, breathing hard, the sound of a hotel lobby behind him. Pop, something's wrong, he said. My cards are declining. My accounts show 0. Everything's frozen. I injected warm, oblivious sympathy into my voice. Son, banks freeze accounts when they see charges from unusual places, I said. You're in the islands, and suddenly there's activity from way out there. Of course, the fraud department locked it down. I'll call them. Tell them you and Kendra are exactly where you said you'd be, enjoying your trip. The silence on the other end was heavy and perfect. He couldn't correct me. If he told me he was standing in a bank in Panama trying to wire stolen money, he'd blow up his entire cover story. He had to choose the lie or confess the crime. Dad, he whispered. I didn't let him finish. Don't worry about it, I said cheerfully. I'm actually headed out fishing for the weekend. No signal out there. I'll call the bank Monday. Enjoy the islands. Tell Kendra I said hello. I hung up before he could say another word. Otis called 14 minutes later. Marcus, he said, grinning through the phone. Your boy called the lot, screaming. Demanded I release the wire. I told him the state flagged the title as stolen this morning and the funds got seized under federal wire fraud investigation. He went dead silent, Marcus. Then I heard Kendra in the background asking why hotel security was walking their way. 48 hours after that, I sat in my leather chair reviewing the quarter's numbers when the front door of my house burst open, followed by furious footsteps down the hall. Terrell and Kendra stormed into my study, looking nothing like the glowing couple in that photo. Wrinkled, exhausted, humiliated. They'd had to beg Kendra's cousin for 2 coach tickets on a red-eye just to get home. Terrell slammed his hands on my desk. "Do you have any idea what you did to us?" he shouted. "We got thrown out of our hotel like criminals. You did nothing to fix it." Kendra shoved past him, launching straight into tears, insisting she'd only gone because her mental health was suffering, that Terrell sold the car out of love, that my incompetence had ruined a healing trip, and I owed them both an apology and money for the damages. I stood up slowly and pointed toward the door. "If you want to talk compensation, we're not doing it standing here in the dark," I said. "Follow me to the living room." I walked them into a room that stayed dark until they crossed the threshold, and then the lights snapped on. Sitting around my dining table was the entire tribunal. Denise Calloway at one end, briefcase open. Otis Redmond beside her, arms crossed, eyes locked on Terrell like he was something scraped off a boot. Next to him, a man in a plain dark suit, federal, unmistakably. And at the far end, slumped and sweating, tie loosened, hands shaking Dwight Halloway. Kendra's face went white. Terrell puffed his chest out, too blind with ego to grasp the trap closing around him. "What is this?" he demanded. "Sit down, Terrell," I said, my voice carrying the full weight of a man who built something real from nothing. "You're about to find out exactly what a vacation like that really costs." Special Agent Ruiz, from the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division, laid out the whole thing plainly. Wire fraud, forged documents, attempted corporate espionage. Terrell looked at Dwight, stunned, demanding to know what happened to the acquisition. Dwight, broken, finally admitted he'd forged Terrell's signature on the incorporation papers because he needed a wealthy, gullible name to hide behind. Someone with enough clearance to bypass the checks, but foolish enough to believe he was in charge. Terrell turned to Kendra, and I delivered the final blow. "Dwight isn't just your business partner's accomplice," I told him. "He's your wife's lover." Terrell's whole body recoiled, refusing to believe it, until I walked to the television mounted on the wall and plugged in the drive. Odessa had installed a hidden camera in their own living room 6 months before she died. The footage played Kendra and Dwight, laughing, mocking Terrell's gullibility, planning to leave him holding every federal charge while they disappeared with the money. Terrell didn't yell. A sound tore out of him I'd never heard a grown man make. Then he lunged across the table and hit Dwight so hard the crack of it echoed through the whole house before the federal agent pulled him off and pinned him to the floor. Denise stood, and in a voice with no mercy left in it, read out the charges. Dwight and Kendra were taken into custody that night on wire fraud, corporate espionage, and money laundering charges. Terrell was charged separately with grand theft and conspiracy to commit fraud. As they cuffed him and walked him toward the door, he broke free for just a second, dropped to his knees, and grabbed my legs, sobbing, begging me to make one call and fix it all, telling me he was my blood, that they'd manipulated him, that he'd sign everything back over if I just made it go away. I looked down at him and felt nothing where love used to live. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a single silver key on an old leather fob. His eyes went wide, recognizing it instantly. "You thought you could erase her memory to fund all this," I said, my voice low and even. But I tracked that wire the moment it hit, had the vehicle recovered from impound before the indictment even came down. "Your mother's car is safe in my garage, exactly where it belongs." I raised him by hand for 36 years, and I said the words, slow, so he'd never forget them. But the man crying on my floor right now is not my son. My son died the same day his mother did. "You're nothing to me now." I stepped back, breaking his grip, and the agent hauled him up and marched him out into the night. The heavy door closed. The house went quiet. 6 months later, Terrell took a plea deal, 5 years in a state facility. I didn't attend his sentencing. Dwight and Kendra turned on each other in federal court, each blaming the other, and were both handed 10 years for wire fraud and money laundering. With the rot cut out, I purged the whole management level at Whitfield Automotive and promoted from the shop floor instead the mechanics and dispatchers who'd given me decades of honest work. The $380,000 recovered from the frozen accounts became the Odessa Whitfield Heart Health Foundation, funding research into the exact condition that took her from me. This evening, the Atlanta sky is turning orange over my garage, and I walk past the rows of quiet machines to the far corner, where that Impala sits gleaming under a single work light, black cherry paint catching the last of the sun. I slide into that white leather seat, and it still smells like her. I turn the key, and that engine roars to life like it's been waiting on me. Greed will blind you to the very hands that feed you. When you look at your family like something to use up instead of something to love, you lose the right to their loyalty. And never mistake a quiet man for a weak one, because some of us will burn our whole world down before we let the wolves eat what we built. Family. Has somebody you loved ever shown you exactly who they really were? Tell me your story down in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn that bell on so you don't miss the next one. The story was written in English, so this closing passage follows in English too. Grief doesn't make you weak. It just asks you to be patient with yourself while your strength finds its way back. Marcus didn't win by shouting or by hating his son forever. He won by trusting the truth and letting people who loved him show up when it counted. Family isn't proven in the easy years. It's proven the day everything falls apart and somebody still chooses to stand beside you. Please note, this story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while still hoping to share a genuine, positive lesson about family and love.